The British Museum, Sub-Basement 3, Department of Anomalous Antiquities. My name is Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Senior Archivist, Custodian of Restricted Collections. What you are about to hear has been recovered from sealed files, letters, journals, and testimonies once thought too disturbing for public record. Every statement you hear is drawn from Britain's forgotten centuries, the whispered history that hides between faith and fear. These are the National Occult Archives, filed, preserved, never closed. Case file NOA 1479C, classification Monastic Chronicle Fragment, date of statement 3rd of March 1479, location St. Cuthbert's Abbey, Northumberland. Author Brother Anselm of Lindisfarne, scribe to the abbot. Translated statement. To whosoever reads, I set down this testimony, so that the sin of silence be not upon me. For 7 nights the bells of our abbey tolled at none but the darkest hour. No hand drew their ropes. The novices swore the tower was empty, yet the sound carried clear over the moors. On the 8th night, I kept vigil in the belfry with Brother Matthias. The wind clawed through the slats, and the sea's roar came hollow from below. Near the turning of the hour, Matthias clutched my arm and pointed a shadow moved where no torch burned. It took the form of a monk, hood drawn, the habit black, though ours are grey. He climbed the stair without sound. I called to him, asking his name. He raised his head. There was naught beneath the cowl but a glimmer, as of moonlight upon water. The bell began to swing. Neither of us touched it. It struck thrice. Each peal sent dust raining from the rafters and made my heart hammer as though echoing its rhythm. Then all fell still. At dawn, Abbot Wilfrid ordered the bell silenced and sealed. When we opened its mouth, inside lay a small stone, smooth and wet as if from the sea. Carved upon it, the letters IACOBUS, the name of the brother drowned 3 winters past when crossing to Holy Island. The abbot cast the stone into the tide, yet that night the bells rang once more, though the ropes were bound fast. Written by my own hand, Brother Anselm of Lindisfarne, St. Cuthbert's Abbey, Northumberland, 3rd of March 1479. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from a damaged vellum codex purchased at auction, 1894. Traces of sea salt within the parchment fibres confirm exposure to coastal moisture. A bell from St. Cuthbert's Abbey now resides in the British Museum. Corrosion patterns correspond to triple impact stress consistent with the account. Case file NOA 1479C, active for theological review. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1612H. Classification: Parish Clerk's Deposition. Date of statement: 21st June 1612. Location: Pendle Parish, Lancashire. Author: Thomas Kershaw, Clerk to Reverend Henry Dayton. Statement: Reverend Dayton bade me take this account, should Providence claim him ere he speak again. In the month of May, there came to the rectory a woman calling herself Mistress Lowe of Barley Hill. She brought neither letter nor companion, yet carried a coffer of oak bound with hemp. She said it contained the bones of her husband, which must rest beneath church ground before Whitsun. The Reverend refused her, for no proof of death was shown. That night the dogs barked until dawn, and the air stank of tallow smoke. Next eve she stood once more at the door, her eyes raw as if she had wept in lime. She said only, He follows the wind now, and the wind follows me. We buried the coffer at her insistence, though no rites were read. Before sunrise, the church bell struck once of its own accord. The ground at the grave was steaming. Reverend Dayton took fever and babbled of footsteps circling his bed. He said the sound was like a chain dragged slow upon flagstone. He died upon Trinity Sunday. I opened the grave to see what lay within. The coffer was empty. Where it had rested, the earth was pale and dry, as if scorched from beneath. Thomas Kershaw, clerk of Pendle Parish, 21st June, 1612. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Original deposition recovered from a bound collection marked Occurrences of the Year of Witchcraft. Ink analysis indicates genuine 17th century composition. Pendle Parish records confirm the death of Reverend Dayton, June 1612. No burial entry exists for Mistress Lowe. Case file NOA 1612H, cross-referenced with Witchcraft Acts Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1734R. Classification Private Journal Fragment. Date of statement 15th October 1734. Location Bath, Somerset. Author Dr. Jonathan Reeves, Physician Extraordinary. Statement: I, Jonathan Reeves, late of Bath, set down these events that my conscience might rest, though my body cannot. In the summer season, I was engaged to attend Miss Clara Endicott, aged 19, afflicted with nervous fits and melancholy. Her father, a merchant of fine reputation, believed the cause spiritual. The girl had taken to staring long into the looking-glass, claiming another face stared back her own, yet smiling when she did not. I forbade mirrors in her chamber, yet one was found hidden behind the bed curtain. The glass was not of local make. Its silvering bore foreign characters like small thorns. On the fourth night she rose in sleep, walked to the mirror, and whispered to it as one greets a lover. Her reflection moved first. She cried out and struck the glass. It shattered without sound. In the morning, every shard was missing save one, curved like a fingernail. Within a fortnight, Miss Endicott was gone. Her garments lay in a heap before the empty frame. The air was cold and smelled of iron. I have since heard the faintest laughter when washing my hands in polished metal. The sound comes from within, not without. Dr. Jonathan Reeves, Physician Extraordinary, 15th October, 1734. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Journal fragment acquired through estate sale, 1921. Residue of mercury and silver nitrate detected on surviving pages. A gilt mirror attributed to the Endicott family is held in storage. Reflection quality remains abnormally high despite corrosion. Case file NOA1734R. Analysis pending under Optical Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1796P. Classification Naval Chaplain's Letter. Date of statement 9th of November 1796. Location Portsmouth Harbour aboard HMS Resolute. Author Reverend Samuel Dacre, Chaplain to His Majesty's Navy. Letter to the Right Reverend Bishop of Winchester. My Lord, I write from the harbour quarantine, where I have ministered to the sick aboard the Resolute. The ship returned from the Indies, her men stricken with a fever unknown to our physicians. Yesterday, the captain was found kneeling in the forecastle, his eyes open yet clouded as glass. He spoke a single word before death, Abel. There is no man of that name in our muster. By evening, 3 more perished. Their corpses bled faintly from the ears, though the surgeon swore the hearts had ceased hours before. The sailors whispered that the sea about the hull steamed in moonlight, though the air was cold. I ordered prayers said upon the deck, and read from St. Luke. At the phrase, "Fear not," a noise rose from below, a cry like timber splitting under water. Then came the stench of brine and rot. We opened the hold. The bilge water had turned black. In its surface floated the shadow of a face, shifting with each lantern sway, as though beneath a sheet of glass. When I lowered my cross toward it, the water quivered and drew back, leaving dry planks where it had lain. Yet by dawn the blackness returned. The surgeon has locked himself in his cabin. The men refuse to sleep for fear of hearing their own names whispered from beneath the deck. I beseech you, my lord, send a man of the cloth stronger than I. The Resolute drifts, though her anchor holds fast, as if the tide itself avoids her. Reverend Samuel Dacre, HMS Resolute, Portsmouth Harbour. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from Admiralty Correspondence Archive, classified file, Naval Quarantines 1700 and 91,800. No vessel named Resolute appears in official registry for 1,796. However, dock records confirm a quarantined hulk scuttled that winter without formal cause. Case file NOA 1796P, pending review under Maritime Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1811L. Classification: Apothecary's logbook entry. Date of statement: 23rd February, 1811. Location: Cheapside, London. Author: Mr. Isaac Lemuel, Apothecary. Statement: I, Isaac Lemuel, Apothecary of Cheapside, record the events of this winter for my own safety and that of the Guild. A gentleman called upon me in January, suffering from sudden faintness and a sweet smell upon his breath like camphor and spirits. He complained of heat beneath his skin and the sense that a flame moved in his chest. I prescribed laudanum and cooling draughts. He returned 2 days later with blisters forming in the shape of a hand across his heart. He said, "Doctor, I dreamt I was ash and the wind was breathing me alive." That night, his lodging house burned. The walls were unscorched, yet his bed was reduced to powder. Only his skull remained, blackened but intact. A watchman swore he saw a light rise from the chimney, take the shape of a man, and fall like embers into the street. I collected residue from the scene, a greasy ash that smelt of oil and brimstone. When placed beneath the microscope, the particles quivered as if alive. 3 nights later, my assistant collapsed while grinding sal ammoniac. His clothes smouldered, though no flame was seen. He expired with that same sweet odour upon his breath. I have sealed the samples in lead and cast them into the Thames. Yet still my rooms are warm, though the fire is out. When I close my eyes, I see a glow behind them, the colour of a furnace door ajar. Isaac Lemuel, Apothecary of Cheapside, London. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Logbook retrieved from private collection, Royal College of Physicians. Chemical residues on binding include phosphorus and unknown organic oil consistent with self-oxidizing material. Case file NOA1811L, closed under Combustion Anomalies Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1838D. Classification: Schoolmistress's Diary Extract. Date of statement: 7th May 1838. Location: Milton Abbas, Dorset. Author: Miss Elizabeth Darnell, schoolmistress. Diary extract. The child was brought to me by the parish warden after the fire at Hollis Farm. She was the only survivor, name unknown, age perhaps 8. Her hands were clean, though the others had perished in ash. When I asked her name, she said quietly, "I am where they went." She slept in the schoolroom corner. Each morning her pillow was grey with fine dust. The older girls complained of cold draughts that smelt of burnt linen. On the third night, I woke to singing a humming sound like a child's lullaby. The room glowed faintly red. The girl stood by the hearth, though no fire burned there. Her eyes were bright as coal, and she smiled as one pleased to see an old friend. By morning the ashes in the grate were mounded high, though none had lit a flame. Among them I found the outline of a small hand pressed into the cinders. That day the parish warden took the child to the rectory. Before nightfall the rectory was gone, not burnt, but absent, as if a hole had been cut from the earth. Only a ring of scorched grass remained. I left Milton Abbas the next day. I have since seen a little girl on the road north of Dorchester, walking alone at dusk. Her dress was grey with ash. Elizabeth Darnell, schoolmistress, 7th May, 1838. Archivist's note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from personal effects of Elizabeth Darnell, deceased 1862. Soil samples from the site of Hollis Farm show abnormal carbon deposition and absence of organic remains. Case file NOA 1838D, restricted under Child Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1851T. Classification: Railway Construction Report. Date of statement: 10th August 1851. Location: Box Tunnel, Wiltshire. Author: Edward Tregeron, Assistant Engineer. Statement: I submit this report to the Board of Works concerning the disturbances observed during excavation of the east heading of Box Tunnel. On the night of the 6th, the navvies refused to continue blasting beyond Chain 27. They complained of voices calling their names within the rock. 2 men swore the sound came from behind them, though the shaft was sealed. I inspected the area by lantern. The air was close and dry. The walls, newly cut, bore markings like fossil veins but arranged in regular spirals. A hammer blow upon them made the tone of a bell. At 1 o'clock, as I examined the wall, a pulse of cold ran through the air, and the lantern flame bent sideways. Then came a breath long and hollow, like wind through a pipe. The men fled. When morning came, the section was clear of debris, as though freshly quarried. No powder had been used. I took a sample and found it warm to the touch, despite lying upon ice water. Under magnifier, the stone shimmered faintly, as if wet. Mr. Brunel ordered the work resumed. That night the blast went off early. 3 men were buried. When their bodies were retrieved, their faces bore the same spiral marks as the wall. The foreman claims the rock now hums faintly when struck. I hear it still in my ears when I close my eyes. Edward Tregeron, Assistant Engineer, Box Tunnel, Wiltshire. Archivist's note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Filed from a collection of civil correspondence held by the Great Western Railway Archives. Box Tunnel Workers' Records list 3 deaths on the 10th of August, 1851. Acoustic resonance tests within the tunnel record persistent harmonic vibrations between midnight and 1 a.m. each year upon that date. Case file NOA 1851T, active under Industrial Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1865V. Classification: Hospital. Matron's Memorandum. Date of statement: 22nd March 1865. Location: St. Saviour's Infirmary, Whitechapel, London. Author: Matron Victoria Hales. Memorandum: It is with reluctance I report the matter of Ward 7 to the Board of Guardians. Patient Eliza Tranter, admitted with chronic wasting, has displayed symptoms not consistent with any known disease. Since her arrival, 6 patients in adjoining beds have fallen into the same stupor, eyes open, pulse faint, breath shallow but steady. All murmur the same phrase in sleep: "Make room." During the night watch, I observed a thin mist about her bed. It rose from the floorboards and curled upon itself like smoke. Within it, faint outlines of hands pressed outward, as if from beneath water. At dawn, Eliza's cot was empty. The sheets lay folded, untouched by weight. Where she had lain, the boards were blackened in the shape of a body, head to toe. The porter swore he saw her walking toward the morgue door, barefoot, the same mist trailing behind. He called to her, but she did not turn. When he opened the door, the corridor beyond was dry and cold, yet footprints of moisture led halfway and ceased. We have sealed Ward 7 until further instruction. Victoria Hales, Matron, St. Saviour's Infirmary. Archivist's note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Memorandum discovered among sealed Poor Law records, transferred from Tower Hamlets in 1935. Chemical testing of ink reveals contamination with potassium nitrate and trace human protein. The site of St. Saviour's Infirmary was demolished. Substructure excavation uncovered timber flooring burned in silhouette patterning matching the report. Case file NOA 1865V, restricted under Medical Phenomena Archive. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1873G. Classification: Gamekeeper's Testimony. Date of statement: 11th December 1873. Location: Glen Etive, Argyllshire, Scotland. Author: Angus MacRae, gamekeeper to Lord Dunellen. Statement: It was near the solstice when I first saw it on the high ridge above the loch. The air had turned sharp, and the deer moved uneasy. At dusk, I found fresh prints in the snow barefoot, small as a child's, yet the stride was long as mine. I followed them into the birch wood. There, hanging from the branches, were ribbons of hide, twisted thin as thread. When the wind blew, they sang like the strings of a harp. At the clearing's centre stood a cairn I had never seen before. Upon it lay antlers, polished to a black shine, and beneath them a hollow where the snow had melted to bare earth. That night the dogs howled till dawn. The next morning I found one lying stiff before the hearth, mouth full of hair not its own. Lord Dunellen ordered the glen searched. At noon we found tracks circling the lodge, again barefoot, again child small. At sunset I looked toward the ridge and saw a figure crouched there, slender, pale, its arms long as a stag's legs. When I raised my rifle, it turned and smiled, though its mouth was on the wrong side of its face. The snow covered the tracks by morning. No prints have appeared since. but each night the antlers upon the cairn seemed to glisten wet anew. Angus MacRae, gamekeeper, Glen Etive, Argyllshire, 11th December, 1873. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Testimony retrieved from estate papers following the death of Lord Dunellan, 1891. Skeletal fragments of non-human origin recorded at the site, displaying mixed cranial morphology. Case file NOA 1873G, catalogued under Zoological Anomalies Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1880S. Classification: Vicar's Seance Account. Date of statement: 28th February, 1880. Location: Parsonage House, Whitstable, Kent. Author: Reverend Thomas Selwyn, Vicar of St. Mary's Parish. Statement: It is my misfortune to record the events of last evening, though my conscience demands it. For some months, the widows of our congregation had taken interest in spiritual gatherings held in the rectory drawing-room. I had long opposed such vanities, yet their persistence wore me thin. They begged that I should attend and witness the harmlessness of their little table talks. There were 6 of us present, 3 ladies of the parish, my curate, a visiting mesmerist from Canterbury, and myself. The candles were extinguished, and the only light came from the hearth. The mesmerist bade us join hands and speak the Lord's Prayer in reverse, a blasphemy which I forbade. He laughed and said it was merely a device of attention. When the clock struck 9, the table began to creak, as if burdened by unseen weight. The ladies gasped. The air thickened. The scent of salt and decay filled the room. The mesmerist asked if any spirit sought to speak. A knock answered from beneath the floorboards. He asked its name, and 3 raps came, 1 pause, then 2 together. He interpreted this as the letter C. He continued, and by knocks alone came the name Catherine. I froze, for that was the name of my late wife. The others could not have known it. The mesmerist asked, "What do you desire of us?" The answer came not as a knock, but as a whisper from the chimney. "Thomas, stop calling my name in your sleep." The fire flared blue. Ash rained from the grate, as though drawn upward. The mesmerist cried that the veil was torn, and the table split down the middle with a sound like thunder. I remember only coldness and the smell of wet earth. When I awoke, dawn had come. The drawing-room door was bolted from within, though I found myself outside it. The mesmerist was gone. Of the 3 ladies, 2 were insensible for hours. The 3rd would not speak again. I have burned the chair where she sat and sealed the hearth. When the wind rises from the sea, I hear my wife's voice whispering from the flue. Reverend Thomas Selwyn, St. Mary's Parsonage, Whitstable, 28th February, 1880. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from parish correspondence during the Diocesan Review of 1934. Residue of sea salt and ash confirmed in flooring samples from the former rectory. Witness accounts of blue combustion and auditory phenomena recorded by local newspaper, subsequently suppressed by church authority. Case file NOA 1880S. Held under Ecclesiastical Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1883L. Classification: Lighthouse Logbook Entry. Date of statement: 6th September 1883. Location: Street Govens Head Lighthouse, Pembrokeshire, Wales. Author: Keeper Elias Wynne. Statement. This entry I set down against the rules, for it concerns no ordinary storm nor failure of duty. At dawn 2 days past, the sea was calm, the glass steady. By evening, a fog came in from the south, not white but green, and thick as river silt. Its light pressed against the glass like hands upon a window. At midnight, Keeper Morgan went to trim the lamp, and did not return. When I followed, the stairs seemed longer than before, as though the tower itself had grown. The lamp-room door stood open, yet no wind moved within. The great lens revolved as ever, but the beam had turned upon the sea below, steady as an eye that would not blink. I called Morgan's name. The light bent down, like a pillar of glass, striking the water in a single bright path. In that path something rose pale, tall, its limbs trailing like weed. It looked upward and smiled. The sea about it burned green. When I stumbled back, the lens ceased to turn. The light withdrew into the fog, leaving only darkness. At dawn I found Morgan's boots by the threshold, wet inside. No sign of him else. I sent word to the mainland, but the boatmen will not come near. They say the fog still glows at night, though we keep the lamp unlit. Elias Wynne, keeper, St. Govan's Head Lighthouse. 6th September, 1883. Archivist's note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Extract recovered from the Trinity House Archives, 1912. The original log was water-stained, pages fused by salt residue. Maritime surveys record unexplained phosphorescent phenomena off St. Govan's Head on the same date. Case file NOA 1883L, retained under Maritime Apparitions Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1885B. Classification: boarding house ledger entry. Date of statement: 3rd November 1885. Location: Spitalfields, London. Author: Mrs. Ada Blythe, proprietress of Blythe's lodging rooms. Statement: to the Metropolitan Sanitary Inspector, I submit this record regarding the disappearance of my tenant, Miss Eleanor Payne, a seamstress lately come from Manchester. She occupied room 5, top landing, paid her rent regular, spoke polite, though she worked late and never took supper. From the first night she complained of scratching sounds in the walls. I told her it was only the rats, but she said the noise came from above, not behind. By the end of the month she looked thin as a rail, and kept the shutters drawn. One morning she asked for a hammer and nails to keep them still. Novary is remestamine. That night I heard the blows myself slow and careful, as if she were sealing something shut. At dawn the lodger beneath came running, saying water was dripping through his ceiling. When I climbed to room 5, the door was nailed from within. We prized it open. Inside, every seam in the wallpaper had been stitched with black thread. The curtains were sewn to the wall. The cracks between the floorboards were packed with rags. The girl was gone. Her dress lay on the bed, but when I lifted it, there was nothing beneath, only a hollow in the mattress, the shape of a person curled in sleep. A black thread ran from the pillow to the ceiling, where it vanished into the plaster. When I pulled it, the whole length came free, wet as if drawn from water. That room stands empty still. At night the boards bulge upward, as though something breathes below. Respectfully submitted, Mrs. Ada Blythe, proprietress of Blythe's lodging rooms, Spitalfields. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Ledger and letter recovered from City of London Police Evidence Bundle, case abandoned, 1886. Threads retained in museum storage, composed of human hair interwoven with flax. Room 5 floorboards exhibited irregular moisture without source. Case file NOA 1885B, registered under Domestic Haunting Catalogue. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1887X. Classification Parish Sexton's Report. Date of statement 14th October 1887. Location Street Mary's Churchyard, Alnwick, Northumberland. Author William Crowe, Sexton of the Parish. Statement: To the Right Reverend Canon of Alnwick, I take the liberty of writing concerning certain occurrences within the churchyard under my care. Since Michaelmas, the earth upon the north slope has sunk in irregular patterns. At first I blamed the weather, yet the depressions align exactly with the older graves, those unmarked since before my time. The ground gives underfoot, soft as ash, though the season is dry. On the night of the 10th, I went to inspect the area by lantern. From within the hollow nearest the wall, I heard a sound like paper tearing slowly. When I lowered the light, the soil began to rise and fall, as though stirred by something beneath. A hand emerged thin, pale, not bone but flesh, yet smooth as wax. I struck at it with the spade, and the thing withdrew without trace. The hole closed, as if never disturbed. Next morning, a grave newly filled the week prior was found open. The coffin lay split clean through, and the body within turned face downward. I swear by the Lord I sealed it myself. Since then, each night the bells tremble though no wind moves them. The rector refuses to enter the yard after dusk, and the church cat has taken to sitting upon the vestry roof, staring north. I shall keep the gate locked henceforth, though I doubt locks will serve. William Crowe, Sexton of St. Mary's, 14th October, 1887. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Report recovered from Diocesan Archives, Alnwick. Soil samples from the northern boundary contained traces of formaldehyde and wax resin not consistent with burial practices of the period. A second record of subsidence exists for the same ground in 1921. Case file NOA 1887X, active under Mortuary Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1890A. Classification Artist's Diary Fragment. Date of statement 21st May 1890. Location Camden Town, London. Author Mr. Julian Ainsworth, painter and lithographer. Statement: I have taken new lodgings upon Mornington Crescent, where the windows face north, a light suited for painting, though the rooms are small. The landlady tells me the attic was once let to a sculptor who died there. She has since kept it empty, yet I am drawn to it. The stillness seems to hum like canvas before the brush. On the first evening, while unpacking my paints, I heard a soft tapping from above, measured, deliberate, like a chisel striking stone. When I climbed to the attic, I found only a stool and a long mirror turned to the wall. Dust lay thick upon the floor, except for one set of footprints that led from the mirror to the door and back again. Each night the sound returned, closer, though the attic remained empty. Yesterday I turned the mirror to face outward. Its surface was clouded with age, yet within I glimpsed what I believed to be my own figure until it moved while I stood still. It smiled faintly and lifted a brush. I saw colour bloom across the glass, strokes of crimson forming a face I did not know. When I stepped nearer, the reflection reached forward as though to meet my hand, and the glass grew warm beneath my fingers. This morning my canvas was found painted with the same image, a woman's face, serene and blindfolded, though I had left it untouched. The pigments used were ones I did not own. The landlady swears the attic has been locked since I departed. At dusk I shall return once more. If I am not heard from, the mirror should be covered and the room sealed. There is something within it that remembers being seen. Julian Ainsworth, Camden Town, 21st May, 1890. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered among personal effects auctioned in 1924, the described mirror is held in museum storage. Residual pigment upon its surface contains trace human hemoglobin. The self-portrait attributed to Ainsworth remains unsigned and depicts an unfamiliar female subject. Case file NOA1890A, retained under Artistic Manifestation Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1893M. Classification: Miner's Letter. Date of statement: 9th February 1893. Location: Bryn Glas Colliery, Rhondda Valley, Wales. Author: Mr. Emma Davies, coal miner. Letter: to my brother. If this reaches you, it will mean I am gone, or something far worse. For 3 weeks now, the pit has moaned like a wounded beast. Even when idle, we hear it the groaning deep below, like timbers straining though the air is still. Old Rees says it is the mountain itself, unsettled since the blasting last month. But I have seen the truth of it. When the lamps are out, a light moves far down the gallery, not flame, but a pale shimmer like the glow of cold iron. It drifts along the walls, and voices follow in its wake, whispering in Welsh, yet older than our tongue. One voice calls my name. 2 nights ago, we broke into a pocket of old workings. The timber there was black with age, but upon the walls were marks, not pick strokes, but carvings of hands, hundreds of them, pressed into the coal like the rock had once been soft. Among them was one fresh, still wet, the shape of a man's hand far larger than mine. Rees swore he saw it move. The others laughed, but I watched and saw the coal breathe. When the light dimmed, a shape stepped forth from the seam, a man without eyes, his face streaked white with dust, his mouth full of soot. He lifted his hand to the lamp, and it went out. We fled, but the tunnels echoed with knocking, steady and slow, like a pick working its way toward us. Now, even in daylight, I hear it beneath my feet. If they order the morning shift to the lower level, tell them not to go. There is something down there that never left when the last shift died. Your brother. Emir. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Letter retrieved from Estate Effects. Family correspondence donated to the National Museum of Wales, 1932. Bryn Glas Colliery disaster records confirm a collapse on the 9th of February, 1893. 37 fatalities, no survivors. Miners' reports mention rhythmic knocking, heard for 3 days after the cave-in ceased. Case file NOA 1893M, active under Industrial Manifestation Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1896W. Classification: Rector's wife's correspondence. Date of statement: 16th November 1896. Location: St Jude's Rectory, Derbyshire. Author, Mrs. Helena Whitby, wife of the Reverend Edward Whitby. Letter, to my sister Margaret. I fear I am not well, though the doctor insists it is only exhaustion from parish duties. You know Edward Tireless, always abroad among the sick and the poor. He has taken lately to visiting the old manor on the hill, long abandoned since the plague years. He says prayers there for the souls that have no one left to remember them. Since his visits began, I have heard voices in the house, at first faint, as if through the walls, reciting scripture in a language I cannot name. Then, last Thursday, I found him in the study at midnight, seated before the mirror, his collar unfastened, whispering to his own reflection as though in confession. He claimed to be speaking to a woman named Mary of the Hollow. He said she came to him first in dream, standing in the ruined chapel with a crown of nettles. He insists she is not evil, only lonely. That night, I woke to see him standing at the foot of our bed, eyes open but unseeing. The mirror behind him showed her a pale shape, her hair floating as though in water, her mouth moving soundlessly. When I screamed, the glass cracked from corner to corner, and she vanished. Since then, Edward has not spoken. He sits by the chapel ruins each dusk, his hands folded, lips blue with cold. Yesterday, I found his footprints leading to the old well, but none returning. The parish men have sealed the chapel. The mirror remains in our study, shrouded with linen. Sometimes, when the fire is low, I hear someone breathing behind the cloth. Pray for us. Your loving sister, Helena. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Letter recovered from private collection, 1958. The rectory mirror was later catalogued in the British Museum under domestic ecclesiastical artifacts, silvering fractured residue consistent with exposure to high humidity and soot. Local oral histories record sightings of a woman's reflection in the glass long after its relocation. Case file N-OA-1896-W, retained under Clerical Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file N-OA-1899-U. Classification: Undertaker's Apprentice Statement. Date of statement: 24th October, 1899. Location: Harrington and Sons Funeral Establishment, York. Author: Mr. Samuel Latch, Apprentice Undertaker. Statement: I, Samuel Latch, being of sound mind, do hereby write this account to clear myself of any blame regarding the incident of the 23rd. It was Mr. Harrington's custom to keep the coffins overnight in the preparation hall before removal to the chapel. I was left to tend the lamps and ensure the shutters were drawn. The deceased was one Mrs. Elspeth Greaves, a widow said to be near 100, who died without kin. Her coffin had been sealed, yet I was told to check the fittings. At 11:30, while sweeping the floor, I heard a dull tapping from within the box, slow, 3 knocks, and then silence. I thought it the settling of the wood, yet the sound came again, lighter this time, as of fingernails. I ran for Mr. Harrington, but he was gone home. The wind outside was fierce, and the lamp flame guttered low. Then from the coffin came a sigh long, wet, and weak. I took up the crowbar to lift the lid, though every part of me screamed not to. The nails came free with little force, as though the wood itself wanted to open. Inside, the body lay still, but her eyes were wet, as if tears had lately formed. Her lips parted, and a faint breath escaped, smelling of earth and roses. I stumbled back and dropped the lamp. The oil spilled across the floor, but did not burn. Instead, it spread cold, turning black, as if ink were flowing from the boards. When I looked again, the coffin was empty. The curtains at the far end of the room stirred, and a shape moved behind them, tall, thin, the outline of a woman with hair unbound. I fled into the street and did not stop running until dawn. When the constable returned with me, the coffin stood closed, the floor dry, and the body once more within, though her head was turned to the left, not the right, as I had left it. I will not go back to that hall. Even now, when I pass the chapel gate, I hear her nails tapping softly from below. Samuel Latch, apprentice undertaker, York, 24th October, 1899. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Statement retrieved from Coroner's Inquest Papers, York Archives. No record exists of Mrs. Elspeth Greaves' burial location. The undertaker's premises were destroyed by fire in 1904. Recovered floorboards display chemical staining inconsistent with lamp oil, resembling sepia ink. Case file NOA 1899U, retained under Funerary Manifestations Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1901C. Classification: Headmistress's Confidential Report. Date of statement: 21st June 1901. Location: Street Winifred's School for Young Ladies, Brighton, Sussex. Author: Miss Clara Pennington, Headmistress. Statement: To the Board of Governors, I submit this account under seal, concerning the tragedy of the lower dormitory. The girls had been unsettled since the death of Miss Harcourt, aged 14, who drowned during a seaside excursion. Her body was recovered 2 days later, hair full of sand, eyes open, though the coroner said she had died instantly. Her bed in the dormitory was left empty, her belongings stored away, yet each morning the covers were found turned down and the pillow indented. On the night of the 12th, the younger pupils awoke screaming. They claimed to see a girl standing at the foot of the beds, her dress soaked and her hair dripping, though no water marked the floor. The matron found the room heavy with the smell of salt. A trail of wet footprints led from Miss Harcourt's bed to the sea-facing window, where none should be, 3 stories above the ground. We called for the vicar, who sprinkled holy water and recited prayers. The air grew cold, and the candles flickered blue. He stopped mid-verse, staring at the window outside. Pressed against the glass was a face, pale and drowned, staring in. The window burst inward with a sound like breaking ice. When we raised the lamps, every bed was soaked through, yet the window was dry, and the floor beneath showed no trace of water. The girls were unharmed, but hysterical. The next morning, I found a small shell upon Miss Harcourt's pillow, a cowrie, still damp, as though from the tide. We have since boarded the window and removed the bed. Still, when the wind blows in from the sea, the girls say they hear the faint sound of waves breaking against the walls. Clara Pennington, Headmistress, Street Winifred's School for Young Ladies. 21st June 1901. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from sealed school records following closure in 1937. Building inspection notes report recurring condensation and salt deposits along the northern windows despite inland location. Local parish archives confirm the burial of one Harcourt, Elizabeth Mary, drowned June 12, 1901. Case file NOA1901C, preserved under Educational Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1903Q. Classification: Choirboy's Confession. Date of statement: 8th December 1903. Location: St. Bartholomew's Cathedral, Exeter. Author, Thomas Quinn, chorister, age 14. Statement: they said I must tell someone, so I write it down for Father Merrow, though he will not believe me. It began after evensong, when we stayed behind to polish the brass. The others had gone, but I lingered, for I liked to hear my voice echo under the vaults. When I sang alone, I could hear another voice joining mine softer, higher, as though from the gallery above. At first, I thought it was the air carrying my own echo. Then one night, the voice sang words I did not know. It was not Latin, yet it sounded holy. I climbed the stair to the organ loft, but no one was there, only the cold and the hymn books scattered upon the floor, pages fluttering as if turned by wind. The next Sunday, during rehearsal, a candle fell from the altar, though no draught blew. The wax rolled to my feet, still lit. Father Merrow's face went pale, and he told me to wait outside. Through the vestry door, I heard him whisper to the verger, "It's her again." That night, I woke in the dormitory and saw a light at the foot of my bed, the shape of a girl, her choir robe grey with dust, her mouth moving without sound. She lifted a hand as if to bless me. When I blinked, she was gone, but the next morning my robe was damp and smelled of incense. I found her name in the old register. Alice Merrin, soprano, died 1892. She was found hanging from the bell rope, the page of her hymn still open. I can still hear her humming when the cathedral doors are closed. Sometimes, when I sing too loudly, she drowns my voice with hers, and the candles burn blue. Father Merrow says I must never repeat her name in the nave again. Thomas Quinn, chorister, St. Bartholomew's Cathedral. 8th December 1903. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Document obtained from Cathedral Archives, 1971. No further record of Thomas Quinn after 1904, presumed deceased. Bell rope preserved in cathedral crypt exhibits salt residue inconsistent with age or use. Case file NOA 1903Q, classified under Ecclesiastical Manifestation Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 19050. Classification Orphanage Ledger Extract. Date of statement 4th March 1905. Location St. Gertrude's Home for Children, Shropshire. Author Sister Agatha Meyer, Order of the Blessed Mercy. Statement to the Diocesan Office. In obedience, I record the incident of the 1st of March, that the truth may be known. At dawn, Matron Hollis reported the dormitory door unlatched, though it had been bolted from within. All 20 children were present, save one Ruth Tamer, aged 9. Her bed was cold, sheets folded, as if made by older hands. A search was made through the grounds. At the well near the orchard, we found her ribbon caught in the crank handle. When drawn up, the water was black as ink, no trace of the child below, nor echo from the drop. That night, while reciting Vespers, the remaining girls began to hum a tune unfamiliar to any of us. The sound rose from all corners of the chapel, soft yet certain the same melody Ruth had sung to calm the younger ones at bedtime. As the hymn ended, the candles were snuffed in unison. I went to the dormitory and found every girl sitting upright, eyes closed, whispering, "She's still thirsty." By morning, the water from the taps ran dark for near an hour. The well has since been sealed, but in the silence of night I hear the creak of the rope and the splash of a bucket rising. Sister Agatha Meyer, Order of the Blessed Mercy, 4th March 1905. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Extract transcribed from Orphanage Ledger, discovered in Diocesan Archive, 1952. Water samples from the well site showed elevated manganese levels and traces of organic residue. Locals report that after rainfall, the soil there turns unusually black before drying pale. Case file NOA 19050, maintained under Institutional Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1907R. Classification: Railway Porter's Account. Date of statement: 27th February 1907. Location: Wensley Station, North Yorkshire. Author: Mr. Harold Rudge, Night Porter. Statement: to the station master, Sir, I make this written account for the company record, should aught befall me before my next shift. The incident occurred on the evening of the 25th. The up train from York was due at 11:45. Fog lay thick upon the line, and the signal lamps shone dull and green. I was alone upon the platform. At precisely the half hour, I heard the bell in the office ring, twice the code for train entering section, though no message had come down the wire. Then, out of the fog, came the sound of wheels upon rails, slow and uneven, like wagons dragged by hand. I stepped forward with the lamp raised. The noise grew louder until a shape loomed out of the mist, not a train, but a single carriage, old-fashioned, of dark wood and iron trim. Its windows were black, though lantern light glimmered within. It moved without engine or horse. As it passed, I glimpsed faces behind the glass pale, unmoving, their eyes reflecting the flame. A woman lifted her gloved hand and placed it flat against the pane. I swear frost formed where she touched it. The carriage rolled beyond the points and vanished into the fog without a sound of brakes or whistle. The line beyond the station, ends in a cutting, closed these 10 years. I ran to the signal box and found the instrument dead, the wire slack as if cut. When the fog cleared at dawn, there were no marks of wheels upon the rails. The telegraph clerk at Bedale swears no train left York after 11. He believes me shaken by drink, but I know what I saw. The brass bell in the office has rung twice more, since always at the same hour, though the lever stands still. Harold Rudge, Night Porter, Wensley Station, North Yorkshire. Archivist's note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Statement filed with North Eastern Railway Incident Reports. Recovered 1,961. No record exists of a carriage matching the witness description in company stock lists. Former cutting site inspected. Residual magnetic anomaly detected along disused trackbed, consistent with high voltage discharge, yet predating electrification. Case file NOA 1907R, maintained under Transport Apparitions Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1909M. Classification: Spiritualist Artifact Record. Date of statement: 15th April 1909. Location: Paddington, London. Author: Mr. Lionel Mercer, certified medium, member of the Society for Psychical Inquiry. Statement: to the Society Council. The object under examination, a sealed glass cylinder containing ashes and a folded slip of parchment, was received by post from an anonymous sender, bearing only the words "Property of the Seance of 1878. At the next sitting, held at my residence, we placed the cylinder upon the table between the trumpets and the planchette. 5 sitters present, all reputable. At precisely 9:15, The table trembled, and the cylinder emitted a faint vibration, though no contact had been made. The room darkened as if the gaslight withdrew of its own accord. Mrs. Fairburn, our clairaudient, declared she heard a voice repeating, "Release the promise." She reached toward the cylinder, but before she touched it, the glass clouded over, as though filled with smoke. Inside, something began to move, a shape like handwriting being written in air. The parchment unfurled of its own motion, pressed against the inside of the glass, showing words that none of us had written. "What you seal binds you, not me." The cylinder split with a crack, and a rush of cold air extinguished every flame in the room. When we relit the lamps, the ashes were gone, and the parchment had turned blank. 2 of the sitters fainted. The 3rd was sick for days. I retained the fragments of glass for study, but they now darken when brought near the fire, as though soot forms from within. I ask that this report be held confidential, for certain members of the society would call it fraud. I swear on my professional standing that every word is true. Lionel Mercer, Member, Society for Psychical Inquiry. 15th April, 1909. Archivist's Note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Fragments recovered in 1922 from the Mercer estate sale. Surface residue contains calcium sulfate and human carbon trace. No record of the séance of 1878 exists in society proceedings, though a similar cylinder appears in an inventory of the Ashwood Circle, Brighton. Case file NOA1909M, filed under Spiritualist Artifact Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1912A. Classification: Asylum Warden's Journal. Date of statement: 12th September 1912. Location: Northwood County Asylum, Staffordshire. Author: Mr. Edwin Armitage, Senior Warden. Statement: Since the renovation of Ward C, disturbances have occurred which I am bound to record. The ward stands empty since the influenza deaths of last winter, yet the night nurses report footsteps and whispering therein. At first I dismissed this as the echo of the ventilation, but on the 6th I verified the sounds myself. At 2 in the morning, while inspecting the corridor, I heard a voice repeating the word "awake." The door to C was bolted. Still, the voice came clear, not loud, but near enough that I felt its breath. When I drew the bolt and entered, every lamp along the passage guttered out. Inside the ward, the beds were stripped and the windows sealed, yet the air moved like breathing. I saw impressions form upon the mattress nearest the far wall, first shoulders, then knees, as if someone invisible had sat down. The temperature fell sharply. My breath showed white in the dark. I retreated to fetch another warden, but when we returned, the mattresses lay flat, undisturbed. Only my own footprints marked the floor dust, save one other set that crossed mine, bare, narrow, and pointed outward, as though the feet had been turned back to front. We sealed the room again and placed the key under lock in the matron's office. The next night, the key was found on the pillow of bed 3, cold to the touch. No one admits to entering. Yesterday morning, the new patient in Ward B, a quiet woman from Hanley, began to murmur the word "awake" over and over until her tongue bled. When shown the corridor window of Ward C from the courtyard, she screamed that someone was standing there, though the ward remains empty. I advise the ward remain closed until further order. The voices have ceased, yet every clock in the east wing now stops at precisely 2 a.m. Edwin Armitage, Senior Warden, Northwood County Asylum, 12th September 1912. Archivist's Note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. recovered from asylum ledgers held by the County Records Office. Building demolition report of 1,939 notes repeated collapse of masonry along East Wing, despite reinforcement. Residual magnetic variation detected at former Ward C site consistent with strong alternating field. Case file NOA 1912A, retained under Institutional Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1915S. Classification: Soldiers Field Journal. Date of statement: 19th May 1915. Location: Ypres Salient, Belgium. Author: Corporal Alfred Sedgwick, 3rd Battalion, Royal Engineers. Statement: to whomever finds this book, if I fall, see that it reaches my wife in Newcastle, or else the nearest chaplain. We were ordered to the front near Sanctuary Wood to repair the trench supports after bombardment. The air was heavy with gas, and the ground soft with the dead. By dusk, we were 6 left of 20. While fixing the duckboards, Private Hale called out that someone was in no man's land waving a lamp. Through the haze, I saw the light faint, flickering, like a lantern swinging slow. Hale swore he heard it calling his name. He climbed the parapet before we could stop him. The fog swallowed him whole. We heard his voice for a moment, and then the sound of running feet too many feet. They came toward us, soft and fast, like water over gravel. Then silence. We searched when the gas cleared. No trace of Hale, save his helmet and his lamp still burning, though the fuel was gone. The flame inside gave off no heat, only a dim white glow. When I touched it, my breath misted though the air was warm. That night, the lamp lighted itself at the trench's edge. It swung back and forth, as though carried by a man's hand. The sergeant ordered it buried. We dug deep, but by dawn it burned again upon the mound, shining through the earth like bone under skin. Every night since, it moves further into the field, stopping only where the gas lies thickest. Those who follow it do not return. If this reaches you, tell them not to dig near the wire after dark. There are lights here that mean no rescue. Corporal Alfred Sedgwick, 3rd Battalion, Royal Engineers, 19th May 1915. Archivist's note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from War Correspondence Archive, Imperial War Museum. Journal exhibits phosphorescent residue between pages. Composition undetermined. Reports of ghost lights in Sanctuary Wood, corroborated by field diaries of 2 other regiments. Case file NOA 1915S, retained under Military Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1918N. Classification: Field Hospital Nurse's Account. Date of statement: 11th November 1918. Location: Saint Omer, Northern France. Author: Sister Marianne North, Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service. Statement: the guns ceased at 11. The silence came like a weight pressing upon the earth. For a moment none of us spoke, and then the men began to weep. I was tending Ward C the gas cases. Most of them would not see the new year. The air still smelled of bleach and blood. At 1:15, I heard movement at the far end of the ward, though all patients were sedated. When I turned, a man stood at the doorway, uniform torn, face obscured by shadow. I called for the orderlies, but none came. The man walked between the beds, pausing at each, resting his hand upon the blankets. Where he touched, the men ceased breathing quietly, without pain, as if lulled to sleep. He stopped before bed 9 Corporal Shaw, whose eyes had been burned near blind. Shaw raised his head and whispered, "It's over now, sir." The figure nodded. Then both vanished, leaving the sheets uncreased. I found Shaw's tag upon the floor beside an imprint of a boot still damp with mud. Outside, the nurses said they saw no one enter or leave. The ward grew colder, though every stove burned bright. That night, when I closed my eyes, I dreamed of rows upon rows of men, standing in perfect silence upon a grey field, their rifles inverted, their faces turned toward the ground. Among them walked the same shadowed officer, his hand outstretched as if blessing each in turn. I woke with tears on my face, and the sound of distant marching fading into nothing. Sister Marianne North, St. Omer Field Hospital, 11th November, 1918. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Account retrieved from War Nursing Archives, 1930. Autopsy logs from St. Omer confirm simultaneous cardiac cessation of 4 patients at 11:15 a.m. local time armistice hour. No officer matching the description appears in any regimental list of the sector. Case file NOA 1918N, preserved under Military Aftermath Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1920T. Classification Theatre Manager's Report. Date of statement 12th October 1920. Location The Lyric Theatre, Westbourne Grove, London. Author Mr. Charles Trent, Theatre Manager. Statement to the Board of Trustees. It is with some reluctance that I document the occurrences of the past fortnight, which have disturbed both staff and patrons of the Lyric. The trouble began after we reopened the upper circle, closed since the fire of 1899. The reconstruction went without incident, save for a faint scent of smoke that lingered even after the walls were repainted. During rehearsal of The Widow's Mask, the actress Miss Dorian reported hearing applause from the empty balcony. She insisted she saw a woman sitting in the front row, dressed in Edwardian fashion, veil down, hands clasped. The woman remained for several minutes, though no one else perceived her. On the evening of the premiere, the gaslights dimmed mid-performance, though no fault could be found. At precisely 9:20, the orchestra stopped of its own accord, claiming they heard weeping behind the curtain. When we raised it, there was nothing on stage yet. Every instrument string was damp, as if touched by mist. The following night, the doorman refused to lock up, saying he had seen a figure crossing the foyer after hours. Her dress was singed about the hem. He described her face as perfect, but wrong. The skin too smooth, the smile fixed. When I entered the box office to verify, the mirrors on the wall had blackened, their silvering run like melted wax. We have since closed the upper circle once more, though footsteps continue to cross it long after the last patron has gone. Sometimes they pause above my office, and a faint voice whispers, "Encore." The electrician swears the wiring is sound, yet each night at 9:20, the house lights flicker 3 times the same minute the fire began 21 years ago. Charles Trent, Manager, The Lyric Theatre, Westbourne Grove, 12th October, 1920. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Original report discovered in theatre archives following renovation in 1970. Residual heat scarring persists along the upper balcony rail, though no structural fire damage remains. Witness accounts from subsequent performances cite recurring female apparition seated row A, seat 4, the location of a fatality in the 1899 fire. Case file NOA 1920T, filed under Performance Apparitions Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1922A. Classification: Antiquarian's Purchase Report. Date of statement: 5th June 1922. Location: Bath, Somerset. Author: Mr. Reginald Paxton, antiquarian dealer. Statement: to the Bath Historical Society, I make this report concerning the item recently acquired from the estate of Lady Merrow, deceased. The piece is a small reliquary, gilt brass, no larger than a snuff-box, bearing Latin inscription Sanguis Promissus, the promised blood. It was said to contain a lock of hair belonging to a saint, though which was not specified. Upon opening, I found not hair, but a small glass vial, stoppered with wax, half filled with dark fluid resembling clotted wine. The moment I lifted it, the air thickened, not foul, but heavy, like the stillness before thunder. I set the reliquary upon my work table. When I turned my back, the lid snapped shut of its own accord, cracking the wax seal. A faint hiss followed, and a smell of iron and rose petals filled the room. That night, I dreamt of a church in ruins, its windows red as sunset, its altar running with dark water. Atop it stood a figure robed in white, lifting the same reliquary, whispering the same Latin phrase over and over. When I woke, my hand was bleeding from a small puncture, though the vial lay untouched. I have since placed the object in a lead-lined box and sealed it with pitch. Still, every midnight, the seal sweats crimson moisture. No leak, no break, only that steady oozing. I beg that the society remove the object from my care. My servant refuses to enter the study, and the hounds howl when they pass the door. Should I not survive the week, I direct that the reliquary be buried, not displayed. Reginald Paxton, antiquarian dealer, Bath, Somerset. 5th June, 1922. Archivist's note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Object recovered from sealed collection following estate liquidation, 1954. Chemical analysis of the residue confirms high iron content with traces of hemoglobin. No provenance found in ecclesiastical records. Inscription style predates 19th century reproductions. Item now catalogued under restricted access in the British Museum's secure holdings. Case file NOA 1922A. Maintained under Occult Artifact Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1925L. Classification: Lighthouse Keeper's Log. Date of statement: 23rd February 1925. Location: St Ives Lighthouse, Cornwall. Author: Mr. Benjamin Hales. Keeper: Trinity House Service. Statement: entry for the night of the 22nd. Barometer steady, sea calm, wind from the east. I was alone on watch. Simmons had retired early with fever. At 11:10, the lamp room temperature dropped sharply. The flame fluttered as though something passed before it, though all windows were sealed. I went below to check the mechanism. The brass pendulum was still, but the gears moved of their own accord, turning backward. The glass of the observation window had misted over from within, and upon it, drawn with a fingertip, were the words, "He waits below." The tide was full, and no boat could have landed. Still, I heard tapping on the iron steps leading down to the jetty, slow, deliberate, metal on metal. When I reached the lower door, the latch turned, though I held it fast. Through the crack came a thin beam of light, the color of old bone. The sound rose to a pounding, then stopped. Outside, the sea shone white, perfectly still, yet reflected in it was another lighthouse darker, unlit, standing where no rock should be. Its lantern glowed faintly red, pulsing like a heartbeat. I called out. The echo came back wrong, the syllables reversed. Then I saw someone upon the gallery of that other tower, a man in oilskins, waving as if to me. The light behind him brightened, and he vanished. At dawn, Simmons found me on the gallery floor, soaked to the skin though I had not left the tower. He swore the log was open beside me, my hand still writing. The words I'd written, I do not recall. Light to light, flame to flame, he climbs. I am no longer certain which lamp burns above me. If another tower answers from the sea tonight, I pray this book finds land. Benjamin Hales, Keeper, Street Ives Lighthouse, 23rd February, 1925. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Log recovered from Maritime Records, 1941. Street Ives Lighthouse suffered unexplained electrical surges recorded on the night in question. Secondary reflection phenomena reported by Coast Guard 3 miles inland. Survey of the coastline reveals no structure matching the description of the second tower. Case file NOA1925L. Classified under Maritime Apparitions Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1927M. Classification Museum Night Watchman's Report. Date of statement 21st October 1927. Location British Museum, Bloomsbury, London. Author Mr. Alfred Penry, Night Watchman. Statement. To the Chief Curator, I regret to report disturbances during the night watch of the 20th in the Egyptian Gallery. The hour was 2:30 when I began my round. The air felt unusually close, as though a storm were coming, though the barometer showed fair. Passing the sarcophagus of Menkaura, I heard movement a rustle, like linen brushing stone. Thinking it a rat, I turned my lamp upon the sound. The beam fell across the glass case, and I saw a handprint appear upon the inside of the glass, 5 fingers clear as mine, then gone. I checked the lock, unbroken, the air inside the case fogged, though no heat source was near. As I stepped back, the floor trembled once, light as the tread of a man's foot. When I reached the central hall, the great clock had stopped at exactly 2:43. The sound of shuffling feet echoed from the north wing, the mummy room. I called out, thinking it a late visitor left behind. A voice answered, soft but clear, "Who guards the dead, guards himself." I followed the sound, and found every display curtain drawn back, though I had left them closed. The smallest case containing amulets from Thebes lay open. The charms were arranged in a new order, forming the shape of an eye. Above them, upon the wall, dust had been cleared to reveal a single word scrawled in English: return. I relocked the hall and summoned Mr. Barton from the lower gallery. Together we inspected every door and found them secure. When we returned, the word upon the wall was gone, and the dust lay undisturbed. Mr. Barton claims I dreamt it, but the imprint of the hand remains visible in the glass, faintly oily, though no one has touched it since. I request reassignment to another section until the exhibit is removed. Alfred Penry, Night Watchman, British Museum, 21st October, 1927. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, filed within security records, recovered from restricted archives, 1958. Inspection of the sarcophagus case confirms chemical residue consistent with human skin oil, despite continuous sealed containment. The eye pattern described corresponds to a funerary sigil of protection inverted in orientation, suggesting invocation rather than ward. Case file NOA 1927M, retained under Institutional Manifestations Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1932S. Classification: Transcript of Private Séance. Date of statement: 14th September 1932. Location: Alderney House, Surrey. Author: Miss Edith Parrow, transcriber for the Society for Psychical Research. Statement: the following record was taken verbatim from the séance held at Alderney House, property of Lord Evesham. 6 participants present, 1 medium, Mrs. Clarice Bede. The recording apparatus malfunctioned at intervals. Transcript reconstructed from shorthand notes. At 9:17 p.m., Mrs. Bede entered trance. The lamps dimmed without adjustment. Temperature fell from 70 to 58 degrees in less than 2 minutes. A knocking began beneath the floorboards, 3 slow raps, then silence. When prompted for a name, Mrs. Bede's voice changed in timbre and accent. She said, "I am beneath the stairs where the light won't find me. Lord Evesham asked for proof of identity." The medium replied, "You locked me in." At this point, Lord Evesham rose sharply, declaring the experiment ended. He appeared faint, muttering of an incident from his childhood involving a servant girl who vanished after punishment. Before we could compose him, the table tilted and struck the floor with enough force to splinter a leg. Every candle in the room extinguished at once. I saw a glow within the mirror opposite the fireplace faint, like lamplight seen through water. Within it, the reflection of the entire party appeared, save one. Lord Evesham's chair was empty. Yet he stood beside me. The medium gasped and said, "She is free." Then she collapsed. The room fell still. Lord Evesham died that night before dawn, cause recorded as apoplexy. The mirror has since been covered. Edith Parrow, Society for Psychical Research. 14th September 1932. Archivist's note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Audio fragments recovered from wax cylinder partially match transcript rhythm. Frequency analysis detects human vocal range overlapping mechanical resonance at 17 Hz, known to induce visual hallucination. Mirror held under controlled conditions. Classified hazardous. Case file NOA 1932S. Retained under Spiritualist Manifestation Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1935W. Classification: Wireless Transmission Intercept. Date of statement: 6th July 1935. Location: Bristol Wireless Station, Somerset. Author: Mr. George Latham, Technician. Statement: at 2342, while calibrating frequency band for coastal transmissions, I received a repeated signal on wavelength 462 meters, too low for civilian use, too high for maritime. The signal pulsed in intervals of 3, followed by a gap of 5 seconds, then 3 again. I adjusted the set to isolate the carrier. Beneath the static, a human voice became audible, faint, male, calm. The words repeated: Station Alpha requesting confirmation of coordinates. Grid unknown. Repeat unknown. At first, I believed it an RAF test frequency, though no such network exists at this range. I responded with the station call sign. Immediately, The reply came, Alpha received. Proceed to latitude 51.47, depth increasing. I checked the map. The coordinates indicate a field north of Wells, far inland. There is no depth. At 03, the voice returned, transmitting image, static intensified. Through it came a low hum, forming distinct modulation. Oscilloscope trace revealed sinusoidal interference, approximating heartbeat rhythm. The amplitude rose until the speaker filament burned white. After replacement, all other stations confirmed clear channels. The interference recurred for 7 successive nights at the same time. On the 8th, only one phrase repeated, "We are below the floor." Since then, the signal persists faintly on open circuits, even when power is cut. George Latham, technician, Bristol Wireless Station, 6th July 1935. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from Post Office Radio Archives, 1957. Attempts to replicate frequency yielded spontaneous amplitude oscillations consistent with low-frequency magnetic disturbance. Field survey, at indicated coordinates, revealed subsidence patterns over sealed tunnels dated pre-Roman occupation. Case file NOA 1935W, retained under Communication Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1938C. Classification: Church Sexton's Testimony. Date of statement: 3rd December 1938. Location: Street Michael's Parish, Norfolk. Author: Mr. Thomas Harwood. Sexton. Statement: It began when we opened the north crypt for drainage. The chamber had been sealed since plague times. I was first down the steps. The air was foul, but still. In the center of the floor stood a stone coffin, lid cracked. We raised it with ropes, and found the body within near perfect, though the records mark her buried 500 years ago. Her hands were folded upon her breast, a small iron key between them. The vicar ordered it removed to the vestry. I did so, locking it in the strongbox. That night, the church bell rang thrice at midnight, though the rope was secured. Next morning, the vestry door stood open, strongbox empty. On the lectern lay the key, blackened and hot. Wherever it rested, the wood smoked but did not burn. Since then, the bell tolls at no hour we know, and always 3 times. The graves nearest the north wall frost over, even in summer. The vicar insists we reseal the crypt, but I believe it too late. The lock on the vestry now turns without a hand. Thomas Harwood, Sexton, Street Michael's Parish, 3rd December 1938. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Letter recovered among parish correspondence, 1962. The key is held in the British Museum under sealed containment. Thermal imaging confirms spontaneous heat emission cycles every 24 hours. Case file NOA 1938C, classified under Ecclesiastical Manifestation Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1941B. Classification: Wartime Bunker Log Extract. Date of statement: 22nd November 1941. Location: Air Defense Command Post, Dover. Author: Lieutenant Andrew M. Collins, Signals Officer. Statement: Routine transmission interrupted at 0100 hours. Unauthorized message received via field telephone, origin indeterminate. Voicemail, mid-range, accent indiscernible. Message, Stand down. Bombs have ceased. The sky is clear. Confirmed with radar enemy presence ongoing. Seconds later, line went dead. At 0137, a soldier stationed at Observation Point 2 reported seeing a man in uniform standing among the craters. No identification marks, no helmet. When challenged, the figure saluted and dissolved into mist. By dawn, the same message appeared handwritten on every report slip in the comms room. No ink or pen trace detectable. Lieutenant Andrew M. Collins, Air Defense Command Post, Dover, 22nd November, 1941. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, recovered through MOD declassification, 1981. Analysis of remaining message sheets shows embedded ferrous residue consistent with carbonized paper, not ink. Case file NOA 1941B, retained under Military Apparition Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1945V. Classification: Village Chronicle Extract. Date of statement: 15th August, 1945. Location: Ashcombe, Dorset. Author: Reverend Peter Vale, Parish Rector. Statement: Victory bells rang across the village today, yet none of us felt joy. At noon, when the church tower sounded the last peal, every clock in the parish stopped. The sexton swore he saw smoke rising from the churchyard, though no fire burned. Children playing near the well reported a woman standing in the mist, her arms raised, calling names not known to them. They described her dress as old-fashioned, blue-grey like faded sky. At dusk, we found deep footprints leading from the well to the lich gate barefoot, small, as of a young woman. The final prints ended at the threshold. Beyond it, nothing. That night, the bells rang again without rope or hand. One long note held for nearly a minute, low and mournful. In the morning, we found the church door unlatched. Inside, every war memorial wreath was turned face down, the flowers crushed to powder. The villagers keep indoors after sunset now. When I look toward the church tower from my window, I see movement, a shadow pacing where the bell should hang. Reverend Peter Vale, Ashcombe Rectory, 15th August, 1945. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Extract from parish records, deposited 1968. Clergy census confirms no Reverend Vale listed after 1946. Local oral history describes the grey woman appearing at harvest each year until the church was demolished in 1953. Case file NOA 1945V, catalogued under Post-War Rural Apparitions Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1950H. Classification: Hospital Ward Incident Report. Date of statement: 3rd March 1950. Location: Manchester Royal Infirmary. Author: Sister Judith Hall. Statement: It happened in Ward 7 during the night shift. The lights flickered around 2:30. Generator steady. No power fault found. When they steadied, bed 4, occupied by a patient named Miss Frayne, was empty. Her chart and IV line remained. A wet imprint of her body stained the sheet, though she had been dry when I last checked her. We searched the ward. All doors were locked from the inside. At 3:05, the intercom crackled, and her voice came through, faint but unmistakable. Still here. Can't wake up. The line connects only to the nurse's station, and no handset was lifted. 10 minutes later, her heartbeat monitor resumed for precisely 30 seconds, showing stable rhythm, then flatline. The next morning, her body was found in the mortuary drawer already tagged, though no one admitted moving her. Her skin was warm, her mouth open as if speaking. Sister Judith Hall, Manchester Royal Infirmary, 3rd March, 1950. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Report preserved in hospital archives. Audio wire from intercom system archived separately. When replayed, the static pattern briefly resolves into spoken syllables approximating wake. Case file NOA 1950H, retained under Institutional Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1953P. Classification: Police Statement, Rural Disturbance. Date of statement: 11th April 1953. Location: North Riding Constabulary, Yorkshire. Author: Constable Arthur Penfold. Statement: responded to call from farmer George Liddell, reporting voices heard in his field after midnight. Arrived at 0:47 hours. Fog heavy. Visibility 10 yards. Witness directed me to the lower meadow where he said the ground moved. Indeed, I observed shifting soil in a circle around 10 feet wide. Sound present whispering, like a crowd at distance. When I stepped inside the circle, the whispering stopped. Soil cold as iron underfoot. Lantern beam showed faint depressions. Hundreds of prints, barefoot, leading inward but not out. A gust of wind passed, and every blade of grass bent toward the center. Then came a thud, dull but deep, as though something large had fallen far below. The air smelled of candle wax and old earth. We withdrew. At dawn, the circle had vanished. Cattle refused to graze there still. Constable Arthur Penfold, North Riding Constabulary, 11th April 1953. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Case file retrieved from police storage, 1989. Geological survey of site shows subsurface cavity of unknown origin approximately 6 meters below topsoil. No sinkhole activity recorded. Case file NOA 1953P, retained under Rural Manifestations Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1957R. Classification: Railway Depot Maintenance Log. Date of statement: 19th November 1957. Location: Crewe Junction, Cheshire. Author: Mr. Douglas Finch, Senior Mechanic. Statement: routine night shift inspection, Platform 3 siding. At 2:10 a.m., the signal lamp at the eastern points switched from green to red without manual control. Power relay confirmed inactive. Seconds later, the sound of a train approached from the east, slow, rhythmic, but no scheduled service due. The fog lamps caught the outline of a locomotive emerging from the mist. No number plate, no smoke, just a dull grey engine. It rolled past the platform silently. Inside the driver's cab, I saw a man seated upright, hands on the controls, his head turned toward me. His eyes glowed faintly, like hot iron. When it passed, the air pressure dropped, pulling at my coat. The rails beneath shone red for several moments. Then, silence. The signal turned green on its own. Morning inspection, found rust flakes fused into the steel of the tracks magnetized, though the line carries no current. Records show an engine lost in a collision on that very line, 1,889, carrying 5 dead, none recovered. I have since refused night duty. The echo of wheels still rolls through the sidings long after the last train leaves. Douglas Finch, Senior Mechanic, Crewe Junction, 19th November, 1957. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Depot report recovered from National Rail Archives, 1983. Residual electromagnetic trace confirmed, consistent with high current arc, though no infrastructure supported such load. Case file NOA1957R retained under Transport Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1963H. Classification: Hospital audio transcript. Date of statement: 6th June 1963. Location: Street Augustine's Hospital, Kent. Author: Dr. Leonard Shaw, Consultant Psychiatrist. Statement: the recording you are about to hear was taken during a therapy session with patient 43 amperes, Miss Evelyn Parry. She was admitted for recurrent auditory hallucinations described as voices in the walls. Session log begins at 9:04 a.m. At 9:06, the static of the tape recorder intensified beyond mechanical explanation. The patient's voice dropped in pitch, overlapping itself as if 2 tones spoke simultaneously. She said, "Doctor, they are listening to you now," and I asked who they referred to. She smiled and whispered, "Everyone you keep here remembers what you did." The lights flickered once. The recording shows voltage constant. A second voice, my own yet distorted, responded from the speaker, "We never left." Miss Parry fell unconscious. Upon playback, the voice remains audible even when her mouth is closed. The recorder was dismantled. Magnetic tape found to have fused layers forming a figure-8 pattern. 2 days later, she was found dead in her room, seated upright, the words, "We never left," scratched into the paint with her fingernails. Dr. Leonard Shaw, Street Augustine's Hospital, 6th June, 1963. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from Hospital Archive, 1989. Original tape preserved under sealed audio containment. Waveform analysis reveals dual phase modulation, consistent with human speech reversed in temporal symmetry. Case file NOA1963H. Classified under Institutional Phenomena Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1970P. Classification: Police audio log abandoned residence. Date of statement: 18th February 1970. Location: Hillingdon, Middlesex. Author: Inspector Robert Kell, Metropolitan Police. Statement: call received 22:19 reporting screams from derelict house number 14 Wexham Lane. Arrived with Constable Fraser at 22:32. House long vacant, electricity disconnected. Entered via side door. Upstairs corridor smelled of mildew and smoke. Voices audible indistinct, whispering rapidly in unison. The sound originated from the children's room. When I entered, silence. Walls covered in chalk drawings, circles, ladders, stick figures ascending. In the center of the floor, sat an old wireless set, unpowered yet emitting faint static. The voice of a child emerged. "He's nearly done." Constable Fraser reported feeling hands brush his coat, though no one visible. The static rose to a piercing whine. Glass in the window shattered inward. When sound ceased, the wireless dial had spun to exactly midnight. We secured the scene. In daylight, the chalk drawings were gone. A burn mark in the shape of a small hand remained on the floorboards. Inspector Robert Kell, Metropolitan Police, 18th February 1970. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Audio recording recovered from Hillingdon Evidence Archive, 1998. Spectral analysis confirms presence of frequencies beyond standard electromagnetic range, origin unknown. Property demolished, 1975. Locals report radios crackling when passing site. Case file NOA 1970P, retained under Domestic Manifestations Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1974. C. Classification Coastal Rescue Service Report. Date of statement 13th September 1974. Location Whitby, North Yorkshire. Author Petty Officer Malcolm Reeves, RNLI. Statement: call received 2:14 regarding flares sighted 3 miles east of the harbour. Launched lifeboat Endeavour 2 at 2:26. Sea calm, weather clear. Half an hour out, all instruments failed simultaneously, compass spinning, lights dimmed. From the port side, a vessel appeared off our bow, an old cutter, black hull, sails furled, though wind was high. No lights, no sound. A figure stood on deck, lantern raised. He gestured once toward the horizon, then vanished. The ship followed suit, dissolving into the mist. Moments later, radar and compass restored. Coordinates showed our craft stationary above a recorded wreck site, HMS Whitfield, sunk 1,871. We recovered a wooden nameplate floating upright beside us, spelling Whitfield in fading gilt. The item is in storage, though the paint never dries, perpetually damp with salt despite being kept indoors. Petty Officer Malcolm Reeves, RNLI Station Log, Whitby, 13th September, 1974. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Item examined 1994. Saline composition indicates natural salt, but continuous osmotic activity suggests organic origin. Witness statements match long-standing maritime reports of a black cutter seen near historical wrecks. Case file NOA 1974. C. Retained under Maritime Manifestation Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1980B. Classification BBC Broadcast Interference Transcript. Date of statement 21st March 1980. Location Broadcasting House, London. Author Mr. Peter Langford, Technical Supervisor. Statement: at 1:42, during routine overnight transmission of the shipping forecast, all outgoing channels were interrupted by a brief unregistered broadcast. Audio recorded. Duration 22 seconds. Transmission contained male voice, monotone, speaking over static. Signal archived. No weather tomorrow. Repeat, no weather tomorrow. Signal faded, replaced by low-frequency hum, oscillating at 7 Hz below audible threshold for most listeners. 3 technicians experienced vertigo and nosebleeds. Monitors displayed spectral lines resembling pulse code modulation but inverted. Playback analysis revealed whispered undercurrent forming coherent words at half speed. Filed, preserved, never closed. I swear those words were not part of any prior broadcast material. We have checked every frequency. None account for origin. When the interference ended, every clock in Studio 3 reset to 0. Equipment fully functional. Tape reels continue to emit faint background noise, even when stationary. Peter Langford, Broadcasting House, London. 21st March, 1980. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Tape archived under restricted audio-visual containment. Playback now impossible. Magnetic oxide degraded yet faint modulation persists. Case file NOA1980B. Catalogued under Communication Anomalies Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1988M. Classification: Museum Reopening Incident Report. Date of statement: 10th October 1988. Location: British Museum, Egyptian Wing. Author: Mrs. Elaine Dorr, Assistant Curator. Statement: We reopened the North Galleries after refurbishment. The first visitors arrived before noon. By 2 o'clock, security reported a strong smell of myrrh spreading through the exhibition hall. No source found. At 3, the temperature sensors failed. The lights dimmed, though the mains supply remained stable. Visitors began complaining of whispers coming from the sarcophagi. At precisely 3:14 p.m., all audio alarms triggered simultaneously. The guard nearest the Tutankhamun replica display reported seeing sand pouring from the joints in the stone lintels. It stopped as quickly as it began. When we cleared the hall, the only remaining anomaly was one open display case, glass unbroken, seals intact, yet empty. The missing item, an Ushabti figurine, small blue faience, accession code BMEGY 1427. Security footage shows the case opening by itself at 3:13 p.m. A shadow crosses the camera, human-shaped but distorted, stretching far beyond normal proportion. The case closed again, gently. That evening, the figurine was found outside the museum doors, upright on the steps, as though placed by hand. Its surface was damp with condensation, despite the dry air. Mrs. Elaine Dorr, British Museum, Egyptian Wing, 10th October, 1988. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Incident verified. The figurine now held under sealed containment within this department. Thermal imaging shows faint internal movement despite being solid-fired clay. Case file NOA1988M. Classified under Institutional Manifestations Register. End of file. Access terminated. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA1993T. Classification: Train Depot Audio Recording. Date of statement: 17th February 1993. Location: King's Cross, London. Author: Mr. Alan Greaves, Signal Engineer. Statement: Maintenance team performing standard signal check following refurbishment. Audio surveillance active across tunnel section 4B. At 3:12 a.m., recording captured faint rhythmic tapping, 12 repetitions spaced 4 seconds apart. Sound source traced to disused tunnel closed since the 1957 fire. Upon playback, beneath the tapping, a voice can be heard indistinct, whispering, "Mind the smoke." Engineer Wilcox reported sensation of heat emanating from the wall, though surface remained cool. Thermal imaging later showed silhouette of a hand pressed against the brickwork. Temperature difference of 8 degrees. Inspection crew entered tunnel at dawn. Soot marks lined the walls, spelling the word "still." The same sequence repeated every 20 feet until the end of the passage. By evening, soot vanished without trace. However, the audio recorder continued, playing back new sounds despite being disconnected, faint crackling, followed by what appears to be the tolling of a bell. Alan Greaves, signal engineer, British Rail, 17th February 1993. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered via London Underground Incident Reports, 2002. Acoustic mapping confirms resonance consistent with unoccupied tunnels. Sound profile matches frequency of original King's Cross fire alarms. Case file NOA 1993T retained under Transport Phenomena Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1998E. Classification: Estate Agent Letter, Property Inspection Report. Date of statement: 6th October 1998. Location: Tenby, Pembrokeshire. Author: Miss Claire Mortimer, Property Valuer. Statement: Inspected property, Gorse End Cottage. Vacant since 1972. Exterior sound, structure fair, though presence of mould extensive. Interior contained faint scent of perfume, lavender type. At 14:20, while photographing upper landing, flash malfunctioned. When image developed, a second figure appeared beside me, woman wearing mourning veil, visible only from shoulders upward. No mirror or reflective surface in position to cause it. On descending stairs, I heard footsteps overhead. Returned to find dust undisturbed except for one footprint in center of corridor pointed toe, small, bare. When I opened the front door to leave, it swung shut against me and locked. The key remained in my hand. I exited through the window. Estate registry shows prior occupant Mrs. Elspeth Carr, died there in 1901. Death certificate states, cause of death, asphyxiation due to smoke from extinguished lamp. When I developed the final roll of film, the negatives were entirely black, save for one image, the door, slightly open, with a lamp glowing within. Claire Mortimer, Valuer, March and Kent Estates. 6th October 1998. Archivist's note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Photographs verified. Emulsion overexposed to single wavelength near 590 nanometers sodium flame spectrum. The cottage remains unoccupied. Case file NOA 1998E. Catalogued under Domestic Manifestations Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2001A. Classification: Archaeological Field Note. Site Anomaly. Date of statement: 28th April 2001. Location: Barrow Hill Dig Site, Wiltshire. Author: Dr. Helen Avery, Field Archaeologist. Statement: Trench B, depth 2 meters. At 1510, uncovered circular stone slab with spiral carvings matching Neolithic pattern. Upon exposure, instruments recorded electromagnetic fluctuation. Soil temperature rose by 5 degrees. That evening, team reported faint humming emanating from pit. Frequency measured at exactly 111 Hz. Subjectively felt as vibration through chest cavity. During night watch, motion sensor activated. Video shows brief illumination concentric light rings expanding outward, then collapsing. Next morning, all batteries drained. When Slab relocated to conservation tent, the humming ceased. At 1943, Dr. Price reported hearing whispering from within the packing crate, "We remember the Sunday." Voice not captured by recording device. Dr. Avery sealed the artifact immediately. 2 days later, the slab's surface showed faint burn pattern in the shape of an open eye. Helen Avery, field archaeologist, Barrow Hill Excavation. 28th April 2001. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Slab now catalogued under Neolithic artifacts. Restricted section. Ultrasound imaging reveals internal cavities producing harmonic frequencies under vibration. Case file NOA 2001A retained under Archaeological Phenomena Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2005D. Classification Digital Transmission Log. Date of statement 4th November 2005. Location University of Durham, Department of Computer Science. Author Dr. Rakesh Dutt, Systems Analyst. Statement: during network diagnostics following a blackout, packet monitoring revealed a recurring transmission header lacking source IP or destination routing data. The payload contained an ASCII text sequence repeating "filed, preserved, never closed." Checksum confirmed valid. The data originated from within our own subnet, though all internal devices were disconnected. The repetition continued for 23 minutes before ceasing. At 2:41 a.m., the department server room triggered motion detection. Security feed shows brief distortion screen static, followed by human outline rendered in binary noise. Duration 3.4 seconds. No personnel were present. Forensic sweep found electromagnetic residue equivalent to low-level corona discharge emanating from the fiber channel hub. Subsequent attempts to replicate transmission resulted in system shutdowns. 1 week later, identical data packets were logged on a private home network 60 miles away. Traceroute resolved to no known origin. We have stored the captured data in isolated memory under encryption, though checksum values alter themselves hourly, forming patterns resembling fingerprints. Dr. Rakesh Dutt, University of Durham, 4th November 2005. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, recovered from University Cybernetic Archives, 2012. Checksum anomaly verified. Each alteration cycle produces recursive data identical to cryptographic handshakes between 19th century telegraph protocols. Case file NOA 2005D, catalogued under Digital Manifestation Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2011G. Classification Geological Survey Field Memo. Date of statement 22nd August 2011. Location Glencoe, Scotland. Author Miss Fiona Grant, Geological Survey Officer. Statement: conducting magnetic susceptibility tests on metamorphic strata near the old quarry site. At 11:38 a.m., readings spiked to 11 times. The baseline field compass rotated full circle twice. the sound of rushing water came from the bedrock, though no aquifer lies beneath. Upon tapping with hammer, faint vibration felt through gloves, rhythmic, like breathing. A moment later, a whisper issued from the stone itself, below. Equipment recorded nothing but static. The assistant witnessed fine dust lifting from the cracks, spiraling in the shape of a column. When it fell, the word below was visible impressed into the soil before collapsing. After incident, all instruments malfunctioned. Returning next day, site appeared undisturbed, but our boot prints from the previous visit were missing, as if wind had smoothed them perfectly. No animal tracks, no erosion marks. We have since abandoned the test area. I feel pressure in my chest whenever I review the samples. One piece of rock emits a faint hum when near the magnetometer. Fiona Grant, Geological Survey, Glencoe, 22nd August, 2011. Archivist's Note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Sample examined under containment. Minor piezoelectric charge detected, though constant. When struck, produces tone at 111 Hz, identical to the Barrow Hill readings of 2001. Case file NOA 2011G, filed under Geological Resonance Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2016W. Classification: Witness testimony, weather station malfunction. Date of statement: 3rd December 2016. Location: Cairngorms Observatory, Scotland. Author: Dr. James Whitlock, Meteorological Officer. Statement: At 22:15 hours, barometric readings began to fall sharply from 1002 to 890 millibars within 60 seconds. All external sensors failed simultaneously, showing temperature drop of 20 degrees Celsius, though the air outside remained still. Stepped out onto observation platform. The sky was clear, yet the horizon rippled as though viewed through heat. In the static of my headset, a voice muttered repeatedly, "The air remembers." Signal analysis later confirmed transmission from within our own frequency band. Moments later, the anemometer spun rapidly, then stopped dead. Frost appeared on the railing in patterns resembling concentric circles. When touched, it crumbled into ash instead of melting. At midnight, pressure normalized. However, every recorded value between 22, 15, and 0 vanished from the system log, overwritten by a single line of text. Reversal complete. Sitsay, Soames. Next morning, the snowfield surrounding the station bore no footprints, not mine, not anyone's, though we had crossed it hours earlier. Dr. James Whitlock, Meteorological Office, Cairngorms Station, 3rd December 2016. Archivist's Note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Recovered from Met Office Archives, 2020. Residual magnetic shift in recorded data suggests temporary inversion of local electromagnetic polarity. Case file NOA 2016W, filed under Atmospheric Disturbance Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2019F. Classification: Field Officer Report, Forestry Commission. Date of statement: 27th September 2019. Location: Kielder Forest, Northumberland. Author: Ranger Thomas Fairburn. Statement: Surveying firebreak perimeter following reports of lights between the trees. Arrived at Grid 12B, 1840. Light mist, dusk setting. Observed steady luminescence approximately 100 meters ahead, pale blue, hovering 2 feet from ground. Approached with flashlight. The glow moved deeper into the trees, maintaining distance. When I halted, it stopped. Branches were motionless, no wind. Upon closing to 30 meters, I heard whispering voices, multiple tones, indistinct but childlike. Then the light divided into 3, forming a triangle that pulsed in rhythm with the whispers. Ground beneath me vibrated softly. When I turned to radio base, static filled the channel. Turning back, the lights were gone. In their place, 3 ash circles, each exactly 2 feet wide. At the center of one, my own boot print, though I had not stepped inside. Later inspection showed the ash composed of microscopic silica spheres, similar to fused sand. Soil sample emitted faint heat for 2 days afterward. Thomas Fairburn, Forestry Commission, Northumberland, 27th September 2019. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Sample analysis consistent with vitrification. No wildfire or electrical strike recorded. Phenomenon parallels historical corpse lights associated with post-burial phosphorescence, though energy origin remains unclassified. Case file NOA2019F, registered under Luminous Manifestations Archive. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA2021L. Classification: Laboratory Incident Summary, Biomedical Research Facility. Date of statement: 8th April 2021. Location: Porton Down, Wiltshire. Author: Dr. Elaine Lawton, Pathogen Research Division. Statement: Routine containment check at 2:15 following sensor anomaly in cold storage bay 3. Upon entry, internal temperature measured -15 Celsius despite regulator displaying +2. Condensation on interior glass walls formed the word inside. When I called for backup, my radio emitted low-pitched static, punctuated by rhythmic clicks, similar to Morse, but irregular. Within minutes, power failed. Emergency lighting flickered once. In that single flash, a figure stood at the far end of the corridor, outline only. No color, as if seen through frosted glass. When full lighting returned, it was gone. Freezer bay door found open from inside. Internal latch remains unbroken. Sample tray 14B missing. Contents: human cellular tissue from unidentified subject recovered in 1952. Next morning, frost pattern had spread across corridor floor in circular formation measuring 2 meters in diameter. Core temperature at pattern center recorded at -20 Celsius, while surrounding air remained normal. Dr. Elaine Lawton, Biomedical Division, Porton Down, 8th April 2021. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Incident verified. Residual trace radiation, identical to isotopic readings logged during 1952 artifact retrieval from Arctic expedition vessel HMS Norham Castle. Case file NOA2021L, catalogued under Containment Phenomena Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA2023S. Classification: Security camera transcript. Public library incident. Date of statement: 12th February 2023. Location: Liverpool Central Library. Author: Mr. Darren Sloan, Security Supervisor. Statement: 2346 Routine Patrol. Camera 7 recorded movement in the rare books room, though access log shows no entry since 19. Footage displays a single lamp illuminating table 3. A page from an open manuscript turns itself despite absence of air movement. Upon investigation, room empty. Temperature dropped from 21 to 10 degrees within seconds. The smell of ozone strong. A faint whisper audible on playback, several voices overlapping, repeating a Latin phrase later identified as in libris manimus, we remain in the books. The page shown turning on film contains a marginal note written in iron gall ink. Return us to the shelves. This note does not exist in the physical copy. All staff confirm page blank. At 02, fire alarms triggered spontaneously. No smoke detected. System rebooted itself and added a new line to the digital incident log. Reshelved. Darren Sloan, Liverpool Central Library, 12th February 2023. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Digital entry still present within building's alarm software. Phrase reappears every February despite firmware resets. Case file NOA 2023S retained under Literary Manifestations Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2025C. Classification Civilian Statement Residential Disturbance. Date of statement 17th March 2025. Location Camden, London. Author Miss Priya Chatterjee. Statement: I moved into flat 3B 2 weeks ago. The previous tenant left no forwarding address. From the first night, faint knocking came from behind the kitchen wall. At first, rhythmic, then spelling, deliberate. 3 knocks, pause, 1, 2, pause, 3. I wrote it down. It matched the pattern for C in Morse. Next evening, knocks resumed, forming the word cold. The wall felt freezing, though the radiator behind it was on full. I placed a glass to the plaster, faint voice, audible, open. A maintenance crew inspected next morning. Behind the plasterboard, they found a bricked archway. Within the mortar, fragments of a wooden door frame, burn marks along the edges. Thermal camera recorded residual heat inside, though no cavity visible. That night, I heard breathing from the same wall. I've since left the flat. Neighbours now report the knocking continuing nightly. Same sequence. Priya Chatterjee. Camden, London, 17th March 2025. Archivist's note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Building records indicate the original Victorian house suffered partial fire in 1899. Blueprints reveal a sealed doorway exactly behind flat 3B's kitchen wall. Case file NOA 2025C, filed under Domestic Hauntings Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2025D. Classification Hospital Staff Log, Night Ward Anomaly. Date of statement 4th April 2025. Location Street Bartholomew's Hospital, London. Author Nurse Margaret Dell. Statement: Night shift on Ward 9, Geriatric Unit. At 2:22 a.m., room monitors registered simultaneous cardiac arrest on 3 patients in adjacent beds. When staff arrived, all 3 were sitting upright, eyes open, unresponsive but breathing. Each spoke a single word in unison: wait. Electrical readings from EKG units froze at identical waveform across all devices. When restarted, equipment displayed date 17 March 1800 and 92. None of the systems possessed a manual input field for date alteration. The following morning, one patient, Mr. Halstead, asked whether the bell had stopped ringing. Upon inquiry, he could not recall making the statement. By evening, all three expired within 1 hour, same timestamp on record, 22:17. Nurse Margaret Dell, Street Bartholomew's Hospital, 4th April 2025. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Audio log recovered. Background reveals low metallic toll repeating every 37 seconds, absent from hospital environment. Case file NOA 2025D, registered under Institutional Manifestations Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2025E. Classification: Archaeological Survey, Cave Discovery. Date of statement: 29th May 2025. Location: Brecon Beacons, Wales. Author: Dr. Gareth Elwyn, historical anthropologist. Statement: While mapping a limestone cave system near Finan-Dee-Doo, we discovered a narrow passage leading to a circular chamber roughly 15 feet across. Walls bore carvings of human figures bowing before a radiant disk. No evidence of torch, soot, or pigment. At 1612, portable recorder captured brief burst of low-frequency vibration measured 111 hertzes. Echo persisted for 20 seconds, though no air movement detected. On reviewing footage later, faint human silhouettes appear across the carvings only when the sound peaks. Team member Hughes reported hearing whispered chant, "O'er Hall Cold Sun" in Welsh. He collapsed seconds later, mild hypothermia symptoms despite ambient warmth. Recovered within the hour, memory blank. The chamber entrance has since sealed itself through minor collapse. Returning 3 days later, GPS showed location offset by nearly 30 meters, though we stood on identical terrain. Dr. Gareth Elwyn, University of Cardiff, Department of Anthropology, 29th May 2025. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Acoustic patterns, mirror frequency, noted in case file NOA 2011G and NOA 2028V. Possible geosonic correlation pending analysis. Case file NOA 2025E, filed under Subterranean Resonance Archive. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2025H. Classification: Parish Record, Clergy Correspondence. Date of statement: 15th August 2025. Location: St. Michael's Rectory, Cornwall. Author: Reverend Jonathan Hales. Statement: To the Diocesan Office. Strange occurrences continue within the rectory since the restoration of the chapel window. At Compline, the stained glass glows from within, emitting blue light although unlit from outside. During evening prayers, the choir reports echoing voices singing half a beat behind their own. Last week the church bell rang once at midnight, rope still bound, mechanism locked. When I entered the tower, the air smelled of sea salt, though we stand 10 miles inland. Written upon the dust of the bell's rim was the phrase, "Remember the drowned." Records confirm the glass panel depicts Street Clement, patron of sailors, added circa 1843. The artist drowned at sea, returning from Falmouth that same year. I request guidance on whether continued services should be suspended until the matter settles. Reverend Jonathan Hales, Street Michael's Parish, Cornwall, 15th August 2025. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Window inspected 2026. Fluorescence observed without UV source. Trace sodium chloride residue within paint confirmed maritime origin. Case file NOA2025H entered under Ecclesiastical Phenomena Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA2026A. Classification: Astronomical Observation Log. Date of statement: 21st June 2026. Location: Jodrell Bank Observatory, Cheshire. Author: Dr. Marianne Coates, Senior Radio Astronomer. Statement: At 2:11 GMT, during a scheduled deep space scan of pulsar PSRB 1919 plus 21, receiver arrays registered a transient burst lasting 4.6 seconds. The signal deviated from the pulsar's expected 1.337-second rhythm, inserting a distinct gap after every third pulse. 14 seconds in, modulation changed amplitude, spiking in Morse sequence. Translation produced 3 words: "We filed first." Rechecked equipment. No fault. Signal repeated twice more, precisely 27 minutes apart. We triangulated origin to a null point just beyond our solar system. No physical source detected. At dawn, the system clock displayed 0 despite continuous operation. Logs rewritten with alternating lines of binary and text, all forming variations of the same message. Later examination revealed additional data embedded within noise bands. Decoded spectrogram displays the outline of a human hand. No broadcast trace detected since. Colleagues dismiss it as interference, yet the receiver intermittently hums that same 3-pulse rhythm even when powered down. Dr. Marianne Coates, Jodrell Bank Observatory, 21st June 2026. Archivist's note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Original recording isolated in magnetic containment drive. Waveform inspection confirms non-terrestrial structure. Case file NOA2026A, classified under Celestial Communication Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA2027E. Classification: Engineering Incident Report, Underground Infrastructure. Date of statement: 5th November 2027. Location: Canary Wharf Extension Tunnel, London Underground. Author: Site Engineer Michael Evans. Statement: Excavation halted after ground sonar detected void beneath Section 9C. Team deployed to inspect. Found chamber approximately 12 feet high, circular, no record of construction. Walls smooth limestone, marked by faint concentric carvings. At 1410, acoustic echo from chamber produced delay, inconsistent with dimensions. Echo returned before source completion. Moments later, all headlamps flickered simultaneously. Surface dust swirled upward in spiral motion. Workers reported hearing whispering like multiple voices repeating "stay beneath." We retreated. Equipment left running continued transmitting faint, low-frequency pulse for 47 minutes, repeating every 9 seconds. Audio file later analysis reveals embedded phrase modulated through interference. It's not hollow, it listens. Tunnel section sealed indefinitely. Subsequent drilling within 30 meters caused unexplained pressure drops and hairline fractures forming circular pattern. Michael Evans, Civil Engineering Division, 5th November 2027. Archivist's Note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Geological survey confirms no pre-existing void. Trace acoustic data demonstrates negative phase delay. Phenomenon undocumented in acoustic propagation. Case file NOA 2027. E filed under Subterranean Anomaly Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2028V. Classification: Veterinary Report, Animal Behavior, Anomaly. Date of statement: 24th February 2028. Location: Carmarthen, Wales. Author: Dr. Bethan Voss, veterinary surgeon. Statement: brought 2 collies exhibiting identical symptoms: listlessness, refusal to eat, constant staring at the ceiling. Owners reported both animals began acting strangely following a thunderstorm 3 nights prior. During examination, both dogs raised heads simultaneously, eyes tracking something invisible. Each emitted low growl followed by short whine. Temperature in clinic dropped to 11 degrees. Both then turned to face the same empty corner. One began pawing at air repeatedly. Within seconds, heart rate spiked. At 11:03 a.m., both animals collapsed. Neither could be revived. Post-mortem showed no disease or trauma. However, cerebral scans revealed faint magnetic alignment neural tissue, polarized as though subjected to external field. Owners later informed me the dogs' collars had vanished overnight. The metal tags were found fused into the floorboards where the animals had slept. I have since closed the practice. When I return to the building, the temperature drops exactly to 11 degrees again, no matter the season. Dr. Bethan Voss, Carmarthen Veterinary Practice, 24th February 2028. Archivist's Note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Magnetic resonance of cranial samples reveals microalignment at 111 Hz, correlating with Glencoe geological case 2011. Case file NOA 2028V, recorded under Biological Resonance Register. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 2029X. Classification: Experimental Archive Transfer Log. Date of statement: 1st October 2029. Location: British Museum, Department of Anomalous Antiquities. Author: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Statement: Final phase of digitization completed. All restricted case files, including 1479C through 2028V, successfully encoded into archival server. Checksum verified. At 23:47, server spontaneously initiated unscheduled mirror process, duplicating 10.4 terabytes of data to unlisted drive labeled Vault 0. No staff authorized this partition. Access attempt returned phrase: filed, preserved, never closed. Screen brightness dimmed. Cursor movement continued unaided. Executing file commands replicating the master directory under my name. I disconnected power. Drives continued running for 9 minutes on no supply. Audio from cooling fans modulated into low hum precisely 111 Hz. All lights in the sub-basement flickered in unison. Then, silence. Upon restart, the Vault 0 partition had vanished. However, each original file now ends with a line none of us entered. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. I have ceased the digitization process. Something or someone has continued it for me. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Senior Archivist, British Museum, Department of Anomalous Antiquities, 1st October 2029. Archivist's Note, Supplemental, Vault access locked. No physical evidence of drive remains, yet 20,000 words of recovered text now loop indefinitely within the system's playback buffer. Their echo persists long after the monitor goes dark. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1930E. Classification: Archivist's Personal Addendum. Date of statement: 20th December 1930. Location: British Museum, Sub-Basement 3. Author: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Senior Archivist. Statement: This record is not for publication. It is written in defiance of policy and perhaps in defiance of reason. The occurrences of recent weeks cannot be dismissed as coincidence. The case files I have catalogued, those I believed safely contained within the Department of Anomalous Antiquities, have begun to shift. Documents I locked within the vault are found upon my desk each morning, arranged in new order. Always the same sequence: 1479, 1896, 1925. The handwriting upon the outer folders is not mine. 2 nights ago, while verifying the Egyptian collection, I heard footsteps descending the iron stair to Sub-Basement 3. No guard was scheduled. I called out, but the sound ceased midway down. The air grew cold and dry, the way it feels before parchment crumbles. Upon the catalogue table lay the case file NOA 1927M, the one concerning the museum night watchman. Across the first page, written freshly in ink, was a single line I do not recall authoring. Who guards the dead guards himself. The same phrase the watchman claimed to hear. At 2:43 a.m., the clock in the archive stopped the precise moment of his report. The lamps flickered, and for an instant I saw a man reflected in the glass cabinet beside me. He wore my coat, but when I turned, the reflection remained, and I did not. I find myself uncertain now which of us writes these words. If the reader finds this entry, leave it within the vault. Do not attempt to cross-reference the earlier files. They resist closure. There are archives beneath the museum that no catalogue admits, and I fear they catalogue us in turn. Filed, preserved, never closed. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, British Museum, Department of Anomalous Antiquities, 20th December 1930. Archivist's Note, Postscript. This final entry was recovered without signature page from Ashcroft's personal journal following his disappearance in January 1931. No record of his resignation or reassignment exists. Case file NOA 1930E, retained under Restricted Collection Personnel Phenomena Register. End of file. Case closed to public record. The original document remains sealed within the vaults of the British Museum. Further access requires written authorization or curiosity strong enough to ignore the warnings. End of file.